Today I will be discussing about the topic for pectoral region. See, first understand what exactly mean by the pectoral region is the part of the chest wall which is present towards the anterior side, right? So anterior side, whatever is the region, that is called as a pectoral region. So we will be discussing about the pectoral region, which is the anterior part of the chest wall. Now within this, what are the subtopics that we will be discussing is, first we will discuss about the skin and what is its cutaneous supply. Second, we will discuss about the superficial fascia which is present just beneath it. And within this superficial fascia, there is a gland called as mammary gland. Mammary gland. So we will be discussing that mammary gland in this superficial fascia. Third one is the deep fascia. And finally, what are the muscles deep inside, that is called as pectoral muscles. So these are the four things that we will be discussing in the pectoral region, right? So once again, pectoral region is actually the anterior part of the chest wall, and in that we will be discussing about the four things from superficial to deep. The first layer is the skin and its cutaneous supply. Second is the superficial fascia, where we will discuss about the mammary gland. The third one is the deep fascia, where we will discuss about the clavipectoral fascia. And what is that? We will discuss that. And fourth one is finally the what are the muscles that is embedded in this pectoral region, right? So first we will discuss about the details of skin. So what is the part of the skin that we have to remember here is, you know that this is the manubrium sterni. This is the manubrium sterni, and below this is the body, and further below this is the xiphoid process. Xiphoid process. So these are the three parts of the sternum, and the clavicle actually articulates with that of the manubrium sterni here. And we already discussed in the thoracic part that there is an angle called as a sternal angle at the level of mbbssternal joint. So this is the sternal angle at the level of mbbssternal joint. And if you take an imaginary plane through this, whatever above the skin, it is supplied by supraclavicular nerves. It is present or supplied by supraclavicular nerves, and its root value will be goes up to C4, right? And below the sternal angle, the next cutaneous or dermatomal supply is T2. So suddenly C4 is shifted towards T2 at the level of sternal angle. So simply to say, above the sternal angle it is C4, and below the sternal angle it is T2. So what about the remaining in between the spinal nerves, that is C5, C6, C7, C8 and T1? What happened to these is, it forms a brachial plexus to supply for upper limb. Brachial plexus to supply for upper limb. Okay, so this is a thing of first the skin or the cutaneous supply. In the pectoral region, the first we had discussed already the skin. The next one is the mammary gland, the breast or mammary gland. Okay, the basic introduction regarding this breast is that it is present in both sexes. Usually things that breast is present in only the females, but it's actually present in both sexes. That is, both in males and females the breast is present, but it is gets rudimentary in case of males. Rudimentary in males. Okay, so please remember, breast is not only confined to the top females, it is present in both males and females, but is well developed in case of females, but rudimentary in case of males. And it is a modified sweat gland. The options will give as modified sebaceous glands, modified sweat glands, like that. So don't confuse. Usually people confuse that sweat as sebaceous gland. So it's a modified sweat gland. Okay, there is a basic introduction to be remembered for that of mammary gland. One is, it is present in both sexes. Second, it is rudimentary in case of males. Third one, it is a modified sweat gland. And why here only we are discussing this mammary gland is because it is present in superficial fascia. Superficial fascia splits to enclose a gland, to enclose the modified sweat gland, that is breast. Okay, so that's why the first we had discussed the skin, the next is superficial fascia, and within this superficial fascia it is split down to enclose the gland, the modified sweat gland, and hence it's the content of superficial fascia, or it is a modification of superficial fascia. Okay, the sweat gland is modified within the superficial fascia itself to form this mammary gland, right? In this, first we will discuss about what is the extent and where it is both in vertically and horizontally, and what is its extensions deeply. Then after we will discuss about the shape and what are the relations with it. So first, extent. So where to where it is extending. Let's imagine this is the sternum and this is the second rib. Imagine this is the second rib and this is the sixth rib. Now the vertical extent of this mammary gland is from the second rib towards the sixth rib. So it is occupying from second rib above towards the sixth rib below. This is what the vertical extent, from above to below. Now what about the horizontal extent is, it is extending from parasternal position, parasternal, to, there is a line which is present in the middle part of axilla called as mid-axillary line. Okay, so horizontal extent is, it is present between from the parasternal position towards the mid-axillary line, whereas the vertical extent is from second to sixth ribs. Okay, it's not the intercostal spaces, I am specifying it is a ribs. So from second to sixth ribs is the vertical extent of this. Now whatever the gland is present in the superficial fascia, that's what we had discussed, but a part of that mammary gland will pierce the deep fascia and enters into the axilla. So let's take, this is a part which is piercing the deep fascia to enter into the axilla. So wherever it is piercing the deep fascia, that part is called as foramen of Lange. Foramen of Lange. So what is the foramen of Lange? It's a foramen within the deep fascia. So once it pierces the deep fascia, now it enters deep inside the region called as axilla. So this part which is present in the axilla is called as axillary tail of Spence. Axillary tail of Spence. Okay. First we had discussed about the vertical extent, then the horizontal extent, all present within the superficial fascia, but a part is extending by piercing the deep fascia deep inside. So while piercing the deep fascia, it forms a foramen called as foramen of Lange, and while entering into the deep inside, that is called as axillary tail of Spence, which is present inside the axilla. That's why the name is given as axillary tail, right? So this is a general extent. Now what is its shape, what is its bed is formed, all this we will discuss now. Coming to the shape and the relations. And if you see from the lateral view, mammary gland is hemispherical in shape. So hemispherical shape. Right. And behind the mammary gland, at the posterior part of the mammary gland, there is a modification of space called as retromammary space. Why it is called as a retromammary space? Because it is present behind the mammary gland. So this space is called as retromammary space. What is the importance of this retromammary space? It's actually a fat accumulation in the retromammary space. What is this importance of retromammary space is, over this retromammary space, the breast will move up and down and also side to side. Okay, so the slight movement of these breasts over which part it will be taking is over the retromammary space. And behind the retromammary space, there is a fascia called as pectoral fascia. It is called as a pectoral fascia, which is a deep fascia modification. And deep inside, there is another muscle called as pectoralis major. This is called as a pectoralis major. And in the lower part, it is another muscle is related, that is called as external oblique, which is the abdominal muscle. External oblique. And also in the side part, there is another muscle is extending, that is called as serratus anterior. It's called as serratus anterior. So simply to say, the bed or the posterior relation of this mammary gland is, one is pectoral fascia, which is a deep fascia of the pectoral region, and that is covering the muscle called as pectoralis major in the upper part. In the lower part, it is related with external oblique, and in the side, lateral side, we have it is related with that of the serratus anterior. So these three muscles will form the bed of mammary gland. Okay. Once again, that's what is the shape. It's a hemispherical shape, and what is present just behind the gland, behind the mammary gland, is retromammary space. What does it contain? It's a fat. What does it help? It helps in slight movements of the breast, up and down, and also side to side movements. Okay, very, very important. Retromammary space helps in movements. This is clinically important. I will say that in the last, the clinical anatomy. Permits free movement of breast. It permits the free movement of the breast. And further behind, we have the pectoralis fascia, pectoralis major, serratus anterior, and then the external oblique muscles. These are all forming the bed. So till now we had discussed basic introduction of these breast, and secondly we had discussed about the extent and what is its extent beyond the deep fascia and what is the shape, and finally we had discussed about its relations that forming the bed of these mammary gland. Once after completing these, now we'll be shifting towards the next one. Next part of the breast, that is the actual content of the mammary gland. So what is present inside the contents? In that, we will discuss about three subheadings. The first content is skin. The second one is stroma, and the third one is parenchyma. So three things are present deep inside the breast. First, we will discuss about the skin. Now, this skin consists of two things. One is nipple, the other is areola. Now, where this nipple actually presents is, see, soft tissue, there is no such specific landmark it is present. Usually it is present at the level of fourth intercostal space. At the level of fourth intercostal space, the nipple is present. This is in a young adults. But as the age progresses, the breast will get sagged down. So whenever it is sagged down, actually automatically the position of the nipple also varies. So position of nipple is not constant. Please remember that. But usually is present at the level of fourth intercostal space in a young adults. Now what is present deep inside the nipple is, it consists of smooth muscles and also free nerve endings. Free nerve endings. So these free nerve endings which helps in the sexual arousal, right? So that helps in the sexual part of arousal is because of these free nerve endings which is present inside the nipple. Apart from these smooth muscles, these free nerve endings are also present. That's what regarding the nipple is. So surrounding this projection of nipple, there is a pink to black colored structure called as areola. Okay, so this is a pink to black colored structure. To black colored structure called as areola, and within this areola there are specialized glands called as sebaceous glands. Sebaceous glands, and these sebaceous glands are enlarged in case of pregnancy. So in pregnancy they are enlarged, and their name in the pregnancy after the enlargement is called as Montgomery tubercles. Montgomery tubercles. Why they have to enlarge? Because during the lactation time it has to secrete so much of these secretions so that the nipple and areola should not crack down due to dryness. Okay, prevents cracking due to dryness. That means it continuously secretes so that the nipple and areola will not get dried off. So when there is no dried off, there is no crackling of the nipple. So if there is any abnormality in these sebaceous glands, that means the secretion is not present or they are not developed, then at that time there will be no secretions. No secretions means the skin, the nipple and areola will becomes dry, and that leads to crackling. And that crackling, wherever the cracking is present, that cracking is invaded by these bacteria, and so during the lactation the baby also will take and has suffer from infections. Okay, so nature had decided that in order to prevent the infections of the baby, that the sebaceous glands are modified as Montgomery tubercles for the secretion during the lactation, right? So these are importance of these sebaceous glands, right? That's about the first part. So this is a projection called as a nipple, and surrounding this projection there is a black structure that is called as an areola. Nipple, and this is areola, which is a part of the skin. So that's why we had discussed under the skin heading. Apart from these nipple and areola, we have inside stroma also. So the second part we are discussing now is stroma. Just remember S for S. That stroma is actually formed by suspensory ligaments. Suspensory ligaments of Cooper. What are these suspensory ligaments of Cooper? Where to where they are actually extending is, it extends from pectoral fascia towards skin, or from the lobes. The inside there is these morphoid glands, they are lobes, and from these lobes also they will extend to the skin. So either from the pectoral fascia to the skin or from the lobes to the skin, there are certain ligaments are extending. Those are called as suspensory ligaments of Cooper. So this is an extension. Like this they will extend. They are not in this direction only, they are radiating. Okay. So these are all called as suspensory ligaments of Cooper. What is the importance of this suspensory ligaments of Cooper is it suspends the breast. Okay, see, breast is actually a mass of soft tissue, right? So due to weight it has to sag down, but it does not sag down because of this pull of these suspensory ligaments of Cooper, so that it make as a tense structure. Instead of sagging down, it is tense, or it is kept in its position by the suspensory ligaments of Cooper. Okay. So importance of the suspensory ligaments of Cooper is it helps to maintain the position of breast. Helps to maintain a position of breast. But what this is in case of young adults. But what about in the old age? These suspensory ligaments of Cooper will become weak and breast sag down. Breast sag down due to weakness. Which weakness? Suspensory ligaments of Cooper. That is in case of older. That's why in the older adults there's a sagging of breast, but in case of young adults it is intense and kept in positions by the suspensory ligaments of Cooper. That's about the second part called as stroma. And the third one is regarding the parenchyma. And what the parenchyma is actually consists of is it consists of 15 to 20 lobes. This numerical is also very important and asked in one of the entrance examinations of AIIMS. So it consists of 15 to 20 lobes are present. And out of these 15 to 20 lobes, I will just show one lobe how it is present, and the remaining lobes are also present in the same manner. So I'm just drawing one lobe. So let's imagine this is a one lobe of the breast, and inside there is a duct where number of acini will be draining. So out of the 15 to 20 lobes, one lobe I am showing that in each lobe there are many acini. Singular is acinus. And these are the secretory portions. And these secretory portions will be collected by this lactiferous duct. And this lactiferous duct will ultimately drain into a dilation that is called as lactiferous sinus. Lactiferous sinus. And this sinus will directly opens at the level of nipple. Okay, like that the 15 to 20 lobes are arranged radiating from the center as from the nipple. The center point is nipple, and from there it is radiating, right? So this radiation is present in the entire part of the breast as this lobes. And how many lobes are present? Out of these are 15 to 20. So I'm drawing here the lobes. And this is the duct portion with its acini. And singular is acinus, and they will come towards this to form an enlargement called as lactiferous sinus, and then drains here. So this is called as lobe, this is called as lactiferous duct, and this is the lactiferous sinus. Okay, so these are the parts for the parenchyma, and all these skin, parenchyma and the stroma together constitutes the breast, right? One is the skin, second one is the stroma, and the third one the parenchyma. All these three together constituting the entire part of the breast, and the same is present on the opposite breast too. So once we had completed the entire part of the breast, now we will be going for the what is the arterial supply, what is the venous drainage of these breasts, and what is the lymphatic drainage. So let's discuss about that in a part wise. First we will discuss about the arterial supply. Arterial supply. So for this breast, what are the things that will supply for the arteries is, let's imagine this is a breast with this nipple here, and this is the, this side is the medial and this side is the lateral. So this is the medial and this is the lateral. On the medial side, there is an artery which is coming from subclavian artery. Let's imagine this is a subclavian artery which will continue here as axillary artery, right? This is subclavian artery, and subclavian artery will continue as axillary artery. And from the subclavian artery, there is one branch will be descending that is called as internal thoracic artery. Internal thoracic artery. And from this internal thoracic artery, there are branches called as perforating branches. Now, what is the vertical extent we had said in the breast? 2 to 6. So, between the 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 intercostal spaces, the perforating branches of internal thoracic artery. That means this is one perforating branch of second intercostal space, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. So these are all the perforating branches of internal thoracic artery. They are large from 2 to 6 intercostal spaces. So these large parts will supply to that of this breast. So these are the 2 to 6 perforating branches of internal thoracic artery. The second one is from the axillary artery. One branch is called as the superior thoracic artery, thoracoacromial artery, and lateral thoracic artery. 1, 2, 3. I'm keeping here one as superior thoracic artery. Second one is thoracoacromial artery. And the third one is the lateral thoracic artery. So these are the three arteries or the three branches which are coming from the axillary arteries which will supply the breast. And finally, there are some more which will supply from the posterior intercostal. They are called as posterior intercostal arteries. Posterior intercostal arteries and its branches. Okay, so three things. One is the two to perforating branches of internal thoracic artery, posterior intercostal arteries, and the three branches, that is the superior thoracic artery, thoracoacromial artery, and also the lateral thoracic artery, which are the branches from axillary artery. Okay, these are all will be supplying to the top of the breast or the mammary gland. Now what about the venous drainage? Venous drainage is also by the same branches which are present in the arteries. That means the internal thoracic vein, second one is the superior thoracic vein, thoracoacromial vein, and the lateral thoracic vein, which will drain into the axillary vein and posterior intercostal vein. Posterior intercostal veins. Here there is important clinical anatomy which we have to discuss regarding these posterior intercostal veins. Why? Because see, posterior intercostal veins has a connection with that of vertebral venous plexus. We have vertebral venous plexus on external side and also internal side. They are called external and internal vertebral venous plexuses. So they simply to call as vertebral venous plexus. You heard about Batson plexus, B-A-T-S-O-N-S, Batson's. So this is one of the part of these vertebral venous plexus. And these vertebral venous plexus have direct connections with the top sinuses of the brain. You know that sinus is a cavity between the meningeal dura and the endosteal dura, and that gap is called as sinus, and inside which the venous blood is running. Okay, they are called as the sinuses of the brain. Okay, so and from this sinus of brain, there is a connections with that of these skull. So why I am saying all these things is because that there is a reason. If there is any cancer in the breast, then these cancer cells will migrate to the top posterior intercostal veins. From there, they have the connections with the top vertebral venous plexus. So whenever the vertebral venous plexus are there, they are connected with the vertebra. So secondary deposits will be present in the vertebra also. That's called as metastasis. That means one part of the region to another part of the region, the cancer migrates. That is called as metastasis. So that metastasis is present in the vertebra and even to the sinuses of the brain to the skull. So it also affects the skull. So the secondary deposits or the metastasis of these cancer usually affects the vertebra and also that of a skull. Why? Because of this reason, where the posterior intercostal veins are connected to the vertebral venous plexus and also the sinuses of the brain. That is why the reason these are the common secondary deposits. Even this vertebral venous plexus have down connections with that of the hip bones. So even the hip bone deposits are also present, but most commonly is the vertebra and the skull. Okay, that's the clinical importance of these posterior intercostal veins. Very, 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 very important. Please remember this. So once the arterial supply and venous drainage is completed, next we will shift to the top lymphatic drainage. So lymphatic drainage. This lymphatic drainage is divided into two parts. One is the superficial lymphatics, how they are draining into the superficial part. Another is deep. But in some books, they are called as the deepest part of the lymphatic drainage. Okay. For your better understanding, I had divided this classification, superficial, deep, and the deepest. How the superficial will get drained? First, we will see that. Let's imagine this is the breast with his axillary tail of Spence through the foramen of Langham. Let's divide the breast into 4 quadrants. This is a upper side and the medial, that's called as upper medial, and this is lower medial compartment. So this is the medial side, this is the lateral side. Whereas this is upper lateral, this is a lower lateral. So 4 compartments are present. And how these four compartments will be draining is, upper medial compartment will be draining into the lymph nodes which is present on the sternum side. Let's imagine this is a sternum, and parasternally there is an artery called as internal thoracic artery, and along this internal thoracic artery the internal thoracic lymph nodes are present. So upper medial compartments will be draining into internal thoracic, or simply called as mammary group of lymph nodes. This is the upper medial. Whereas the lower medial compartment will pass just below the diaphragm as a connections called as subdiaphragmatic lymph nodes. So let's imagine this is a diaphragm, and just below the diaphragm we have subdiaphragmatic lymph nodes. These are called as subdiaphragmatic lymph nodes. LN means lymph nodes. Okay. From the lower medial compartments, they are connected to this subdiaphragmatic group of lymph nodes. So the upper medial compartment will be going to the top internal thoracic group of lymph nodes, and lower medial compartment will be going to the top subdiaphragmatic group of lymph nodes. And this subdiaphragmatic lymph nodes has direct connections with the top ovary. So they may migrate to the top ovary. Whereas the upper lateral compartments, they will be draining into, there are a group of lymph nodes in the axillary region. They are called as axillary lymph nodes. So these are called as axillary lymph nodes for the upper lateral compartment. Whereas the lower lateral compartments, they are drained into posterior intercostal group of lymph nodes. Posterior intercostal lymph nodes. Okay, so four parts are going into four different regions. Upper medial going to internal thoracic group of lymph nodes. Lower medial subdiaphragmatic, which has direct connections with that of the ovary. Why I am saying this, there is a reason that I will discuss in the later clinical anatomy. And upper lateral compartment will be directly draining into that of axillary group of lymph nodes. And what are the different groups of axillary lymph nodes, we will discuss in the axillary region. This is not the time to discuss that. Actually, we are going in a flow with the mammary gland. Next, in the lower lateral compartment is draining into posterior intercostal group of lymph nodes, right? So these are all the superficial lymphatic drainage. And remember, all these superficial lymphatic drainage are divided into quadrants, and all these quadrants are collected by this, except for nipple and areola. Except for nipple and areola. So superficial will collect from superficial part of the breast as the quadrants which we had discussed, except for nipple and areola. Then what about the nipple and areola, sir? They are collected by deep group of lymphatics. So the deep, nipple plus areola plus deep breast along with axillary tail of Spence. Tail of Spence. From all these, they are forming a plexus. They are called as subareolar plexus. Subareolar plexus of Sappi. From this subareolar plexus of Sappi, they will be draining into axillary group of lymph nodes. Okay. So just beneath the nipple and areola, there are certain plexus, and this is called as subareolar plexus of Sappi. So from the nipple and areola, they are connecting, and while its course, it also collects from the deep part of the breast and also the axillary tail of Spence, and ultimately drain into the axillary lymph nodes. This is what the course for deep part. And what about the deepest? The deepest will be draining into apical group of lymph nodes by piercing clavipectoral fascia. Pierces clavipectoral fascia and ultimately drains into apical group of lymph nodes. Apical group of lymph nodes. So this is the three different types of lymphatic drainage present in the breast. And sir, what is meant by clavipectoral fascia? I will discuss in the next session, that is the deep fascia of pectoral region. Okay, in that I will say what is exactly the clavipectoral fascia. and they will be draining into apical group of lymph nodes. So this is what regarding the lymphatic drainage of breast. Once the lymphatic drainage is completed, next we will shift to that of the nerve supply. Nerve supply, there is nothing extraordinary to remember. That smooth muscles which is present in the nipple has to be controlled by the autonomic nerves. But the majority control of these secretions of the milk is under purely hormonal control, but not under the neuronal control. You know about the hormone called as the prolactin. This prolactin will cause the contraction of the myoepithelial cells surrounding the acini. And these whenever they contract, the acini are get compressed so that the whatever the secretion of milk is present will be secreted out during the lactation period. So that's about the neural part. Now coming to the clinical anatomy, which is related to the breast, that particularly the carcinoma of the breast. So in the carcinoma of the breast, there are three things to remember. First thing is a retracted nipple. The second one is retracted skin, also called as puckered skin. Puckered skin. Third one is PD orange. And finally, fixed breast. Everything of the carcinoma, everything is related with the carcinoma of the breast, and it affects one or the other parts of the contents of breast. So if the carcinoma of the breast is there, for example, that carcinoma of the breast, if invades the suspensory ligaments of Cooper. So where does the suspensory ligaments of Cooper are extending? From the pectoral fascia towards the skin, right? So whenever they are invading, then the suspensory ligament of Cooper will just contract. For example, this is the breast, and from here to here, there is a one suspensory ligament of Cooper from the pectoral fascia. Okay. Now, from this suspensory ligament of Cooper, whenever it is invaded by the carcinoma of the breast, then there is a tension of the contraction of these suspensory ligaments of Cooper that makes the skin to form a depression here. That is called as a retraction of the skin or puckered skin. Okay, so retraction on puckered skin is due to invasion of carcinoma into suspensory ligaments. So if suspensory ligaments are invaded by this carcinoma, then there is a puckered skin will be present. But instead of these suspensory ligaments of Cooper, if it affects the lobes, this is one lobe, and here is the lactiferous sinus with its duct. So same carcinoma, if it affects the lobe, then it causes the retraction of the nipple, because the carcinoma which causes the fibrous tissue will retract that lactiferous duct and sinus backwards. So whenever there is backward such things, then there is a retraction of the nipple. So retracted nipple is due to carcinoma invading the lobes. Invading the lobes. So if the carcinoma is invading the suspensory ligaments of Cooper, then it causes the puckered skin or the retracted skin. Whereas if it invades the lobes, it causes retracted nipple. Okay. If there are any subdermal lymphatics are obstructed due to carcinoma cells, carcinoma obstructing subdermal lymphatics. Subdermal lymphatics, if it is obstructing, then automatically it appears as edema like structure with many pores that appears as a orange peel appearance, that's called as PD orange. Okay, PD orange is its appearance is like a orange. The breast appears like an orange with the covering of these orange which having some small dots with a yellow colored or yellow to orange color structure. So that dots like appearance will be present due to the obstruction of subdermal lymphatics. And if the carcinoma invades the retromammary space, So what is the function of retromammary space we had discussed? It helps in the mobility. So if that carcinoma is invading the retromammary space and the underlying structures, does the breast will be mobile freely? No, that's called as fixed breast. So if carcinoma invades the retromammary space, so the carcinoma invades the retromammary space and its bed, then there is a fixation of breast. So this is a clinical anatomy related with this. One more clinical anatomy that we had discussed is the secondary metastasis of carcinoma cells through the vertebral venous plexus into the vertebra and also into the skull. So this is what the entire clinical anatomy of the breast. Now we will be discussing about the topic of pectoral region that is called as deep fascia of the pectoral region, called as pectoral fascia. Okay, the deep fascia in the pectoral region is called as pectoral fascia. So in the previous sessions we had discussed the pectoral region is divided into 4 layers. The first layer is the skin. Second layer is the superficial fascia, where we had discussed the mammary gland because it is present inside the superficial fascia. The third one is the deep fascia, and this deep fascia is present in the pectoral region, so this is called as the pectoral fascia. Okay. So now we will be discussing about this deep fascia or the pectoral fascia. Now how it is present is, let's draw, is the breast, and somewhere here is the retromammary space, and behind that retromammary space there is a fascia is running that is called as pectoral fascia, and this pectoral fascia is covering a muscle which is present behind, that is called as pectoralis major. Pectoralis major. And further behind this pectoralis major there is a bone called as a clavicle, and further below the clavicle behind the pectoralis major there is pectoralis minor, and this is the clavicle. Extending from the clavicle anterior border and the posterior border there is a fascia, and that fascia fused to form a single layer which continues down up to the pectoralis minor. At the level of pectoralis minor, it divides to enclose the entire pectoralis minor and goes further down to continue as axillary tail of spines. So the fascia which is extending from the clavicle to the top pectoralis minor, that means let's imagine this is point A1 and this is point A2, and just above the pectoralis minor this is point B. From A1, A2 to B, whatever is the fascia which is extending between the clavicle and the pectoralis minor, between the clavicle and the pectoralis minor. So that's why the fascia is called as clavipectoral fascia. So the name of clavipectoral fascia is between the clavicle and the pectoralis minor. So this part which I am highlighting now with the blue color, this is called as the clavipectoral fascia. Everyone, usually students think that clavipectoral fascia is present even below the pectoralis minor, and that is not the clavipectoral fascia. That below the pectoralis minor, this is called as axillary tail of spines. And what does this axillary tail of spines importance is that it maintains the concavity of axilla. See, axilla is the one which is present between the anterior axillary fold and the posterior axillary fold. In between these two folds, it is not straight. Instead, it is concave. Why that concave is because it is due to the pull of this axillary tail of spines. And where is the axillary tail of spines is coming from? It's a continuation of clavipectoral fascia below the pectoralis minor. Right. So that's about these clavipectoral fascia. So remember, the blue highlighted part is only the clavipectoral fascia between the clavicle and the upper border of pectoralis minor. Now question is, what are the structures that pierce the clavipectoral fascia? So this is called as clavipectoral fascia. So what are the structures which will pierce the clavipectoral fascia? First one is the thoracoacromial artery. Let's imagine this is a axillary artery, and one of the axillary artery branches is thoracoacromial artery. So I'm keeping this as number 1, and this is axillary artery. And just medial to that axillary artery, there is a vein called as axillary vein. Draining into the axillary vein also, there is another vein which is piercing the clavipectoral fascia to drain into it. That is called as cephalic vein. Okay, so the first one is axillary artery branch called as acromiothoracic artery or thoracoacromial artery. The second one is the cephalic vein, which is draining into the axillary vein by piercing the clavipectoral fascia. Third one is, we had discussed in the breast part the deepest lymphatics, right? So the deepest lymphatics also pass through this clavipectoral fascia to drain into apical lymph nodes, apical group of lymph nodes, right? So this is the deepest lymphatic. So simply you can say that the lymphatics from the breast and finally one more nerve which will pierce here is the lateral pectoral nerve. Let's keep this as number 3. And the fourth one also pierces, which comes from the brachial plexus, BP, brachial plexus, and that fourth one is called as a lateral pectoral nerve. So these are the 4 structures that pierces that of clavipectoral fascia. Again I'm stressing clavipectoral fascia is between the clavicle and upper border of pectoralis minor. Below the pectoralis minor, it is not called as clavipectoral fascia. It continues as axillary tail of spines below the lower border of pectoralis minor. Okay, and what are the structures pierces is, you know about an investigation called as the total leukocyte count, right? So this is the mnemonic. T for thoracoacromial artery, L is for lymphatics and also the lateral pectoral nerve, and C is for cephalic vein. These 4 structures, you can say TL2 because 2 L's are present, TL2C. So these are the structures that pierces of clavipectoral fascia. That's about the deep fascia of the pectoral region. See, in the pectoral region, first we had discussed about the superficial skin. Then just beneath it, we have discussed the superficial fascia where the mammary gland is present. And the next layer is the deep fascia where we had discussed about the clavipectoral fascia. Now, once we reflect the deep fascia, now we will see that of pectoral group of muscles. So, what are these pectoral group of muscles is? One is pectoralis major. Second is pectoralis minor. The name major and minor is given based upon their size. The one which is larger is given as pectoralis major and the one smaller is called as a pectoralis minor. Apart from these 2 muscles, there are 2 more muscles are present. One is a small muscle called as subclavius and other is serratus anterior. Okay, so these are the 4 groups of muscles that are present in case of pectoral region. So for any muscle, we will discuss about 4 things. What is the origin? What is the insertion? What is the nerve supply? And also its action. So these 4 things are mandatory for any muscle. So we also discuss the same things in this muscle part. First, we will discuss about the pectoralis major. Pectoralis major. So what is the origin of this pectoralis major? Let's imagine this is the clavicle on the right side and this is the sternum. Now the sternum, we have attachments of second rib, third rib, fourth, fifth, sixth. And on the medial ends, we have the costal cartilages. So this is the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth ribs. Now what about the other end is having the humerus. So on the other end of the humerus, we have a bicipital groove, and for that bicipital groove, there is a lateral lip and also a medial lip. So let's imagine this is the lateral lip and this is the medial lip for that of bicipital groove. Now where the origin is for the pectoralis major is the medial end of the clavicle and also the anterior surface of the sternum along its lateral aspect. So in the anterior surface on the lateral side, is the origin. Along with that, it also originates from the costal cartilages of 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th and 6th ribs costal cartilages. From all these, the origin is taking place. And where the insertion is, it is going to insert with that of the lesser, or the, you can say, the lateral lip of bicipital groove. Okay, so these fibers are originating from the clavicle, sternum, and costal cartilages and inserting over the lateral lip of bicipital groove. Now these fibers are again divided into two parts. One is the clavicular fibers, the other is the sternal fibers. These clavicular fibers will be coming down and insert in the lower level, whereas the pectoral muscles, which are pectoral muscles, the one which are originating from the sternum, that is the sternal fibers, will be going upside and insert over the lateral lip of bicipital groove. Okay, please remember, even though clavicular fibers are above and sternal fibers are below, but the insertion is different, that sternal fibers will insert above and clavicular fibers will be inserting below. So there is a twisting of the fibers while getting inserted over the lateral lip. So this is the extension of muscles. This is for the pectoralis major. Now what is the nerve supply? Nerve supply is by both medial and also the lateral pectoral nerve. So it is supplied by two nerves. One is the medial pectoral nerve, the other is the lateral pectoral nerve. And what are the actions is, whenever the pectoralis major is contracting, so it causes the level of shoulder joint, it causes the upper limb to come towards the front side, and also it makes the medial rotation of the shoulder joint like this, and also it causes the adduction. So these three things are the actions of pectoralis major. One is adduction, next is the flexion, and also the medial rotation. These are the actions of pectoralis major whenever the medial and lateral pectoral nerves together are getting stimulated. Right. So origin, once again I'm writing here, the medial end of the clavicle plus anterior surface of sternum and also 2 to 6 costal cartilages. This is the origin. And insertion is a lateral lip of bicipital groove. Lateral lip of bicipital groove. This is the insertion. Okay. So origin insertion, I had already said that even though clavicular fibers are above and sternal fibers are below while getting originated, but while inserting their fibers are twisted so that the clavicular fibers are inserting at the lower level and the sternal fibers will be going towards the upper level. Okay, that's about the pectoralis major. The second muscle that we will be discussing now is pectoralis minor. Let's imagine this is the right side clavicle again, and here is the sternum. And just below that of clavicle, there is a small projection called as coracoid process. Coracoid process. And again here is the second rib with its costal cartilage, third rib with its costal cartilage, fourth rib with its costal cartilage, fifth its costal cartilage, and sixth with its costal cartilage. So here also 2 to 6 we had mentioned, but the pectoralis major originates from the anterior surface of the rib only from 3 to 5. That means from here, here and here. So from the anterior surface of the rib, I'm not talking about the costal cartilages, I'm talking about the rib, anterior surface or anterior ends of the ribs. These fibers are getting originated and inserts over the coracoid process. So the fibers will be going in this direction. This is the pectoralis minor. Origin is the anterior surface of 3, 4, 5 ribs, and insertion is the coracoid process. And what about these action nerve supply is, it is also supplied by both medial and also the lateral pectoral nerves. Medial and lateral pectoral nerves. And what are the actions is, it causes the coracoid process to come down whenever it gets contracted. That means the coracoid process is a part of scapula. So whenever the coracoid process is brought down, the scapula also will become down. So that's called as a depression. So depression of scapula is for pectoralis minor. Okay. So these are major muscles and minor muscles in the pectoral region. Apart from these, the next muscle, another one is subclavius. The name itself is suggesting that it is present below the clavicle. Let's imagine this is a clavicle, and just beneath here is the first rib is coming with its costal cartilage. Okay. This is the clavicle and this is the first rib. Now the origin of this subclavius is at the first costochondral junction. Okay. This is the costal cartilage and this is the first rib. So origin is at first costochondral junction. Now where these fibers will be going and insert is, it will go and insert over the inferior surface of clavicle. Inferior surface of clavicle. Okay, so origin is the first costochondral junction. From there it will be extending above towards the inferior surface of the clavicle. So what is its act? Its nerve supply is, it is supplied by nerve to subclavius, which is a branch of upper trunk in the brachial plexus. What is this brachial plexus? Where is the upper trunk will be coming? That we will discuss in the brachial plexus part of axilla. And what are the actions is, it stabilizes the sternoclavicular joint. Between the sternum and the clavicle, there is a joint. Let's imagine this is the sternum. So here this joint is called as a sternoclavicular joint. So this sternoclavicular joint is stabilized by this subclavius muscle. Stabilize the sternoclavicular joint. This is what regarding the third muscle, that is subclavius. And finally the fourth muscle is serratus anterior. Serratus anterior. Let's do the transverse section of the thorax. And in the transverse section on the posterior side we have the scapula. So this is the scapula and this is the rib. With its costal cartilage. Now the origin of this serratus anterior is from the lateral surface of the ribs of 1 to 8. From 1 to 8 ribs there is a origin on the lateral surface. Origin is 1 to 8 ribs on its lateral surface. From there the fibers will be going and inserts along the ventral surface of the scapula towards the medial border. Okay, we have ventral surface. This is the ventral surface and this is the dorsal surface. So over the ventral surface on the medial side, these fibers will be getting inserted. That means fibers will be radiating like this. Okay, so whenever the muscles is getting contracted, it causes this medial part of this ventral surface to come towards the front side. That is called as protraction of scapula. So its action is protraction of scapula. Whereas insertion, we had already said, it's a medial part of ventral surface. Medial part of ventral surface. And what is the nerve supply is, it is supplied by long thoracic nerve. Long thoracic nerve. See the medial borders, we have two scapulas. This is the medial border of left scapula, this is the medial border of right scapula. They are kept in position by the pull of serratus anterior. Whenever there is a damage of this long thoracic nerve, then serratus anterior will be paralyzed. So once paralyzed, then medial border will be raised on the posterior side. That appears just like a wings. And this is called as a winging of scapula. So if any damage to long thoracic nerve damage, then that leads to serratus anterior paralysis. What is the action is, it causes the medial border to come towards the front side. But once it is paralyzed, then medial border will not come front side, instead it will go back side. Whenever it goes back side, appears like a wings. That's called as winging of scapula. So winging of scapula is due to the damage or the paralysis of serratus anterior. So which nerve is damaged? Long thoracic nerve, which is also branch of the brachial plexus. So this is what regarding the fourth subsection of the pectoral region.